ever since Kanye West kind of got kicked out of the what I would call the streetwear slash fashion industry, there's been a lot of conversations about what he can do as an independent operator in that particular space. And what we're going to talk about today is how you can build out a streetwear line as an independent operator and kind of set yourself as a foundation to build off of. Because what I think a lot of people are doing is they're kind of doing what I call um, projections of what they believe Kanye West can do, but not necessarily based on their own experiences. It's kind of like this idea where if I just think he can do it, then he can do it. I heard people say, well, you know what? He can go and, operate using Bitcoin, things of that nature. And so what you get on the internet is nothing wrong with everybody having their own opinion, but often people will project what they think this person can do kind of based on what I call like a Disney World idea of how the world actually works. And we're going to talk about what Kanye West could have done, which now he may have to do with his fashion ideas from the perspective of real creative. And what we're going to talk about is what I was able to do in streetwear without having any of the material resources that Kanye West has, any of the connections, and definitely any of the financing that Kanye West have, and what I was able to do in the streetwear space, just based on understanding how to construct things properly, and then kind of taking examples of people that have come before me. So that's pretty much what we're going to talk about. You don't have to be a creative to take value from this. You can utilize this in your own situation. But as a creative, one of the things I'm very inspired to do is help other creatives and help creatives don't not end up in the situation that Kanye West has ended up in. Because this is what happens a lot of times when you desire to fast track yourself and you don't build foundation first, you put yourself in a position to have everything taken from you, right? And I think a lot of people don't understand that because in what they do for a living, they don't have to build foundation. They're just a piece of a puzzle. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you start talking about having to build foundation, a lot of times when you try to cut corners in that, you can end up in the situation that Kanye West is in. And then also some of what has happened to him is a byproduct of the system that we live in. That's pretty much what we're going to talk about. If you don't desire to build out this type of foundation, you're not in the streetwear, you're not in the fashion, but you still want to kind of try to figure out how to make some money on the side. You don't like the fact that your job is only going to pay you a certain amount of money regardless of the inflation. You don't like the fact that you make a certain amount of money and you don't necessarily know what you can do to try to change that. When it's here to go and investigate the highest paid online, it is an options trading academy. It's been proven to get results of people that want to apply themselves. You got about 2 more months left in the year. I would encourage you now to start getting started on your 2023 goals as opposed to waiting to 2023. And then you end up in the same place next year that you're currently at right now. And let's get back into the particular discussion. What we're going to talk about is how to build out a streetwear line the way Sway told Kanye to do it. And people that were paying attention, I want to say almost a decade ago, Kanye went to sit down with Sway. He talked about some of the challenges he was having in business. And Sway kind of told him, why don't you just do it on the independent level? And Kanye became very adamant about telling Sway that he didn't know what he was talking about. And one of the reasons why I think that Kanye did that is because he wanted to get fast-tracked. Kanye West wanted to use his name, his celebrity, to get fast-tracked in fashion. Because historically, what happened in fashion is that you would move to New York, maybe LA, maybe to Europe, and you would work for another house. And you would do what we call cut and sew. And you would cut. Kanye doesn't know cut and sew. He acts like he does, but he doesn't. You would do cut and sew for somebody else from a larger house. You would prove your worth inside their organization. And then if you got enough attention, you would get somebody to finance your lines, right? Because you had proven yourself working the way up. You do the same thing if you want to work in the chef space. You start off in the kitchen. You start off pretty much running errands, cutting vegetables, things of that nature. You may become a sous chef. Then becoming a sous chef, you work yourself up to where eventually you can run a kitchen and somebody trusts you with running the kitchen. There's a process to everything. To me, what Kanye West wanted to do is he wanted to use his celebrity to skip the process, which was cool. His celebrity afforded him that. But we're seeing now with some of the limitations of skipping that process, not building yourself up from the ground up the way traditionally it's done with everybody else in fashion, regardless of the color of their skin. And Kanye didn't want to do that. He also didn't want to be a boutique line. And he wanted to avoid that. He wanted to be the Balenciagas and Louis Vuittons And I don't think the average person takes into account how long those particular fashion houses have been around. Some of those fashion houses have been around before we were born. Therefore, you're not going to be able to build out that kind of fashion house in 5 to 10 years. It can take decades to pull that off. And it takes decades of consistent releases, building a brand reputation. It can take decades. It's not a 5-year run to get to that level. But in the internet era, in the metaverse, where people, they blow up on YouTube relatively fast, they have very little to no real life experience, and they're seen as authorities on YouTube. He's playing to the audience that believes that that's how the world really works. But the world outside of fashion, the world outside of the YouTube doesn't work that way. So fashion is still run on an old school platform. They're still running fashion like it's 1955. They don't care about the internet. The internet is big to the people on the internet, but in fashion, they're still running fashion like it's 1955. So there's a long process to becoming really recognized in that space. And I think Kanye wanted to get around that. When Sway told him, man, you should just go independent and you can build it out from a boutique standpoint, Kanye was very adamant that Sway didn't know what he was talking about. Kanye now has retracted his statement and said, well, Sway was right the whole time, right? So this is what you can do it based on what Sway told Kanye. Now, really quickly, it is my opinion that we need micro businesses, right? Because we can't be independent of any system if we don't know how to replicate what that system provides for us. Many times what we do is we down talk micro businesses. We down talk them. And one of the reasons why we do it, in my opinion, is because most of us really don't understand business, right? Because most of us don't operate in a certain space of business. Most of us have not had to build our situations from the ground up. We've been able to tap into what somebody else has already built. And so you'll get these narratives that, well, you don't have a real business if you don't have X amount of employees, right? Or you don't have a real business if you're not doing 1, 2, 3. And you have to understand is that you can't become independent of a system if you don't know how to do what that system is already providing for you. Therefore, if you don't start taking the goals to do what that system is already providing for you, you can never be independent of it. So many times we have a lot of our people that don't desire to be independent of certain systems. Therefore, any narrative around that is negative. And one thing I learned over time is that many Black people don't believe in business. They believe in business when it's time for them to get employed, but they really don't believe in business. And I found it out because I used to try to talk business to a lot of people back when I was in college and I was still living in Tampa. And many of these people were college educated. In fact, many of them had advanced degrees and they had no interest in business. Their job was to figure out how to get the most education to get the highest paying job. But often, and this is something we were talking about earlier, the tax liability that you're going to have because you're a high-paid employee can be higher than if you just started a small business on the side and try to write off some of the stuff that you were doing. But we're not taught that. And what I found is that many Black people are anti-business until it's time for them to get a job employed in a business, and then they want to work for the best business possible. But they don't really believe in us starting our own businesses. They have a negative idea about it, and they look to down talk it, right? For whatever reason, I don't know. I don't try to figure it out anymore. I just deal with the people that think like me. But that's what I found out. And that's why I'm not an advocate for telling everybody they need to start a business, even though I feel like that can benefit them, is because I know how many people have been socialized for us to be anti-business, right? And that's what we don't understand, okay? So looking at this type of stuff, so you got the farmer's market, right? The lady or the person, they do the organic growing, they do the small scale growing, they bring that to the farmer's market and they sell that to people in their community, okay? We can have an issue inside the United States where, you know what, from a logistics standpoint, we can't get produce. We can't get food, right? The only people you're going to be able to go to is the independent food growers. But the average person doesn't even know who they are. They're used to going to commercial outlets to get their food. We had an issue behind that George Floyd situation where there was a lot of unrest inside the city. Unrest inside the country. Many of our transporters told their companies, I don't want to transport right now because I don't feel safe on the road. As a result, goods were slow to move into certain areas. If we have a 2 to 3 week run of something similar to that, many people are not going to be able to get food because they're getting all their food from commercial outlets. They don't know where their farmers markets are at. They don't have relationships with independent food growers. And these are the things that are important. We can't override or beat a system if we're so dependent upon the system to provide everything to us. But we don't think on that level. And most of us don't want to be independent of the system. We just want to get the best situation in the system that we can get. We have no desire to build a parallel situation to the system. We just don't. And I've accepted that. So I look to build with the people that have that personality. And I don't try to make people realize that they need to do something different. I'm cool with them being dependent upon that, because I know what happens if they say, you know what, for the next 2 weeks, we're not going to get any food deliveries. Most people are going to go crazy because they won't know where to get any food from. The same thing. I know a brother, he's on my old YouTube page, Swanson Farms down in South Georgia. Brother out of Jersey. They own farmland in South Georgia. They raise livestock, right? And they sell organic, sustainably, I don't know what you call it, sustainably grown or sustainably made animals. They slaughter their own animals, they sell them. I interviewed him maybe 3-4 years ago on my old YouTube page. These kind of people are important. This guy's not Tyson Foods. He doesn't have 12 employees. It's a family-owned business. Therefore, but I'm supposed to believe that because he's not Tyson Foods, his business is not important because he doesn't employ 10 people. But if something happens, I know I have a meat guy that I can go to get meat from, that I know is not puffing his animals full of hormones. He's not puffing his chickens full of arsenic, right? He's not doing those things to try to make sure he gets higher yields because of the type of operation that he's running. You understand me? But he's not running Tyson Foods. He's not running Hormel. It's not that scale of business. It's a family-owned operation primarily run by his family. It's a small-scale operation. But we need these type of operations to build off of, right? But I've realized that many of our people don't really want to do business. We really are not comfortable in that space because of a lot of socialization. And for some of us, it's just not who we are. But because we're a minority group and we lack those people in our group, the impact to us is disproportionate as opposed to another group of people that may have 200 million people amount of their group, right? So this is what I want people to understand. So this is going to be for creatives. Even if you're not creative, you can take something from it. So to me, everybody's creative in their own way. I'm more artistically creative. And what I did was I took that artistic creativity and I applied that into more of a different type of business model. But a lot of what I do is based on my creativity. But to me, everybody's creative in their own way. So what you can do is you can take from this and figure out how to use this in your own way from a creative standpoint. And then many people are just not creative at all, right? Most people can't hear notes. Most people can't see colors, right? And they're the people that just consume creative work, but they don't have the ability to produce any of their own. I tell a lot of my tech people, you need to think creatively. You can't just think cold, because to solve problems in tech, you have to think creatively, not just think I know code. But a lot of them, because they're not creative, they don't understand that. But it's the guys like Steve Jobs that understand creativity plus tech is the guys that solve a lot of the really big problems, and they have the mass appeal, right? So let's keep going. First thing you want to do is you want to get inspired, okay? So if we're going to do our own streetwear line, our own fashion line, the first thing you got to do is figure out where you're going to draw your inspiration from. That's the most important thing. What is going to inspire you to create what you're looking to create, right? That's the thing. What's going to be your inspiration piece? So for the line I started, right, my inspiration piece was a lot of the surf and skate fashion that was around when I was a child. Now I'm from Central Florida. I'm from an era before the internet. Internet, we act like the internet's been around 40 years. Internet didn't really get big till like 2010, 2011. That's when social media got real big. Email took off like in the mid to late 90s. Therefore, this social media space that is very normal to us hasn't really been around that long. I'm before social media. Most people in the country don't know anything about skateboarding or surfing. Definitely surfing, because surfing is very regional. I'm from a part of the country where a lot of people surf, right? I'm from a city, we're about an hour away from the beach on the east side, and we're maybe an hour and a half away from the beach on the west side, because I'm from the middle of the state. I grew up with a lot of guys that surfed on the weekend. I grew up with guys that would skip school to surf. One of the best surfers considered in the history of surfing is a guy from my state, right? He's considered one of the best surfers of all time. He's a Hall of Fame surfer. He came out of the state of Florida. Surf fashion was really, really big when I was in middle school and high school. And what they would do is they would create these designs on these shirts. So growing up, I would see these designs that were very intricate, a lot of colors, very well done. It was a big part of their culture was the art. It wasn't just the surfing, it was the art on the clothing. And the clothing really was a print or a platform for the art. It wasn't about putting a big name on it. It was really about the art. And that's something I grew up watching, right? So we're talking about your inspiration. What's going to inspire you to do what you do? Then we go into the skateboard stuff. So these are the kind of fashions that I was seeing growing up for skateboards, right? So this is a skateboard design, right? This is another skateboard design. So what you're seeing is multicolors, really, really elaborate artwork. And I'm going to show you the comparison of what I'm talking about. So this is my inspiration, okay? So here's an ad from a magazine. We see that same art on the skateboard for this particular skater. So growing up, I was being exposed to this type of fashion all the time, right? Some more of that same art, okay? So there was a particular skate company that put out this kind of art for every one of their skateboards. And they not only put it on the board, but they put it on shirts, they put it on stickers. So you kept seeing the art, same thing, really elaborate design, multicolor, right? Now, so this is the reference point. So this is where I'm evaluating myself from an artistic point of view. So this is my reference point, and I'm saying, well, I need to create something that's going to be comparable to that, because that's what I'm using as a reference point. But this is the, I would say the alternate, right? Because this is what I see a lot in the shirt game. Hold on, did I mess that up? Okay, mess that slide up. This is what I see as an alternate in the shirt game. What you see is a lot of just print stuff, right? And what I mean is that what we've gone now in a lot of the shirt game is just block lettering on the shirt. There is no real artistic stuff to it. It's just block lettering on the shirt. And to me, these remind me of the shirts that somebody prints up if we're going to do the softball club. So, you know, you got the softball club that plays softball on the weekend, and it'll be like, you know, Joe's Crab Shack. And then on the back, it'll have a number. And to me, that's what most shirts look like. And those became really, really big over the past 6 or 7 years. You know, put the hot little saying, I'm too blessed to be stressed, right? Black women are the future. Then you got the shirts where they put like almost the whole paragraph on the shirt, you know, for like the military patriotic type stuff. But it's all just block lettering on the shirt. These are really popular, but this is not what inspired me. And when I saw the t-shirt game going in this direction, you know what I said? It's time for me to get out, because the demand of the audience was, I just want this quirky little saying on the shirt, but I'm not interested in the artistic side of it. So I realized it was time for me to get out of the game, because I was not able to give the audience what they wanted, because I came up in an era where it was the graphic and the creativity and the art, which was what was driving the demand for the particular article of clothing. You wanted to get that design. You didn't just want letters on the shirt. You wanted to get that actual design because you like how the design looked. So you got to realize is that the marketplace has kind of changed to where people are now snapping up shirts that just say White Lives Matter. But my thing is, Kanye, you're a creative. Why not put some artwork on the shirt? Now, I know on the front of the shirt, there's some artwork, but there's no artwork on the back of the shirt. And nobody's talking about the front of the shirt. They're talking about the back of the shirt. And that's what I want people to understand. So the first thing you got to do is figure out what's going to be your inspiration, right? Second thing you want to do, you want to decide if you want to do print on demand, right? Or you want to do bulk print. Now, what's going to be the difference, right? Print on demand is the stuff that everybody's pretty much doing now, to where the person goes to the little online website and they order the shirt and it gets printed then, and then they send it out and they do everything for you. And you can do that. You can attach that to your Shopify account and they'll do everything for you. And all you got to do is do marketing and promotion, because they're going to do all the work for you. Now, the downside is that they're going to take all your money. Why? Because they're doing all the work. So they're going to take the majority of your profits because they're doing all the work, but it can create a low stress situation for you. Now, another problem that you will have, though, is if somebody doesn't get their shirt, they're going to reach out to you, and you may not know why they didn't get their shirt because you're not the person sending it out. But many people, if you look at their shirt line, it's print on demand. And there's nothing wrong with that. The average person doesn't want to go through what we're going to talk about today. They have an idea for some designs. They go throw them up on this particular website. They do all the work for you, and they just send them out, right? And that's how it works. Or you want to do bulk print. Now, bulk print is what I did. So bulk print is where you establish a relationship with a printer. They print out a certain amount of shirts for you, and they send them to you. And there's issues with both. So you got to decide which one works best for you. I want to do another fashion line, right? For my trading group. But I know me. I would spend a lot of time looking at fabrics. I would spend a lot of time looking at graphics. And I don't think the audience would appreciate the time that I would spend trying to make sure that we put something out that's going to look a certain way. And it would take away from my trading, because I'm not going to just throw some letters on a shirt and throw it out there, because that's not what I'm going to do. And I'm not such a slave to what the audience wants that when it comes to from something creative, that I'm just going to give them whatever they want, because I won't feel good about that. Right? I don't care that the audience wants 1, 2, 3 on the shirt. That's weird to me. Therefore, I'm not going to do that. And so people have told me, when you're going to put out like t-shirts for the trading group, I was like, the work I would have to put into it to make it look the way I want it to look, it's not going to be worth the return. You know what I'm saying? And then also where I'm going to price it at. When I was selling my shirts, I was pricing my shirts at $40, and I was selling them at $40. I'm not going to argue with nobody over the price of my gear, because I know what I put into making the gear come out a certain way. Right? So I'm very arrogant like that when it comes to creative work. I know what I put into it. If you don't like it, you don't have to buy it. But I'm not doing bargain basement hunting with people, because I know the work that I put in. If you want to get cheap clothes, go to Walmart. They got all the cheap clothes you want. Right? So another thing, print on demand may not give you the color expression. And we're going to kind of talk about that. So let me show you what I mean real quick. We're talking about color expression, right? So look at this shirt right here. You're seeing 1, 2, 3, 4. The black is also a color. You're seeing maybe 5 colors on the shirt, right? That's going to be expensive to print, right? So when you're looking at print on demand, they may not give you color expression, which is why you get these kind of shirts, where it's one color. It's a black shirt with white on it, right? So you got to take this into account. When I was doing my shirts, I was doing minimum 3 colors. Therefore, I needed a printer that could handle that color expression, because like I said, this was my template, right? This stuff was my template. This was my reference point. You're still seeing multiple colors on the shirt. You got to, so take all of this account into what you're trying to do before you go to POD and realize, well, the POD is only going to give me 2 colors. Well, can I do what I want to do with just 2 colors? If I can't, then I need to go to a bulk printer, and then there's going to be issues that you're going to have to deal with that, right? Then you want to research the fabrics that you want to get printed, and then research what type of ink that you want to use. So the first thing is going to be the fabrics, right? What kind of fabric do you want to use? That's what I talked about. I'm going to put a lot of time into this. I went and I was using Gildan shirts. So you got all these different shirts. You got Hanes, you got Gildan, you got jerseys. You have all these different people that can actually print out or create the shirts for you, right? Which is going to be the format that you're going to use, or pretty much what I call your canvas. Each one of those shirts is going to have pros and cons. Some of those shirts are going to shrink when you wash them. Some of them are going to fall apart when you wash them. So you got to think about this. The type of shirt that American Apparel was using, it was very, very thin, right? Then based on what type of shirt that you're going to use is what kind of ink that you can put on the shirt. A thin shirt can't deal with a heavy ink. You got different type of inks. You got discharge inks. You have like that type of ink to where it's almost like it's oil. You have a lighter ink than that. You want to think of all this stuff. So when you're looking at the Kanye West shirt with Candace Owens, that's a very cheap ink that they're using, right? I know it because I know the space. That's a very cheap ink. That's almost like it's like an oil slick on the shirt. It's very heavy. It doesn't breathe, things of that nature. The average person doesn't know it because, like I said, those shirts are like you print those out for the softball club or the church group. But when you really come out of this space, you want to look at the fabrics. You want to look at the inks. Can the fabric carry the ink? How much does it cost to print out this type of ink as opposed to something else? Can this particular firm that you're operating with do it? So the POD may not give you that level of option in fabric or ink because the POD is going to use the shirts that they have a relationship with. What if you don't want to use those shirts? Right? Also, they're going to use a certain type of ink to print. What if you don't want to use that? These are the things that you got to research first. So we were talking about Kanye West. He wanted to put out shoes. Why did he go to Adidas? Because Adidas was going to do all the work for him. He was essentially just a creative consultant. The work that I'm telling you to do, he didn't want to do that work. Kanye West's job was to come in as a creative consultant, to issue designs to Adidas and let Adidas do all the work to figure out mold, where we're going to get it manufactured, how we're going to get this particular shoe engineered, turnaround times, making sure that we keep the integrity across the board, quality control, relationship with the manufacturer. All of this initial work I'm telling you to do, Kanye West didn't want to do any of this. He just was essentially there as a creative consultant, and he got a royalty as a creative consultant, which he should have been happy to get, because why? He's just a creative consultant. He's not involved in any operations. And they gave him a royalty, which was a heck of a deal. But in his mind, the deal's not good enough. So now, if he's going to take all of this on, you know what he's going to find out? He's going to be overworked and underpaid. Before, he was underworked and overpaid. But he's going to find out now that he has to sweat all these details, or he has to hire somebody to sweat these details, and he has to manage them. He's going to find out that I'm going to be overworked and underpaid in regards to what I'm doing. So now we're going to find out, is this guy real creative? Is this really his passion, or was he just there for the attention and the royalty fee? And these are the kind of things that you got to deal with. So we talked about before, what are the limitations of the printer or the print on demand based on what you want to do? Based on what kind of print that you want to put out, what kind of representation that you want to put out, what are going to be the limitations of that particular firm that you're operating with? And each one's going to be different. You may go to a bulk printer and they may say, hey, we don't have discharge inks. We only got this type of ink. Well, what if I want to use discharge inks? What if I want a certain look on the shirt? There used to be these shirts that y'all may not remember because they're not out anymore. There was a MMA brand, and they would have the whole print all over the whole shirt, right? So it wasn't just like on the front or the back. It was a print all over the shirt. That was done with a discharge ink. There's only certain people that can get you that kind of print, because you got to have a certain process to do that, right? So based on what you want to do, you got to know, can this particular firm do that for me? Because I want to, okay, Nuclear Dad said that's sublimation. Appreciate it, Nuclear Dad. I thought it was discharge. So you remember those UFC, those MMA shirts where the print was all over the whole shirt. It's only certain firms that can do that, right? So I appreciate you correcting me so I could be corrected. That's sublimation. I appreciate that. So you got to know, can they do that? So if I wanted that for my shirt, POD may not be able to do that. I may have to find a particular firm, right, that can do that type of print based on what I want, but I never did that. So Nuclear Dad, I appreciate you coming through with the correction, because like I say, if once you really get into this space, the different type of prints that you can do is very deep, and you got to know what you want based on what type of firm that you're dealing with. I appreciate that. Like I say, I can stand corrected on this because it's a deep game, right? So then what is it going to cost to get the shirt based on the company that you want to use? So now you got to look at the cost, right? So if you're using POD, the cost is not going to be as great because you're going to know the cost up front, right? But if you're going to use a firm to do it, what is going to be the cost? And every firm's going to be different. And then they may have to ship it to you, which can also be a cost. So if you're in the eastern part of the country and you're using a firm out of Washington State, what is it going to cost for them to print it and get it to you? And so you may have to look at a group of firms and figure out, what is it going to cost for them to get those shirts to me? And you just want to get a ballpark, because what you want to know is how much can I make for the work that I'm doing, right? And that's also going to impact your cost. So for you to get the shirt to you, if it's going to cost you $15 a shirt, you already understand about what you have to charge now on your shirt, because that's not going to be all your cost of goods. But just for them to get the shirt to you, it's going to be $15 a shirt. But they only can give you 3 colors. Well, what if I want 5 colors? Well, each color is going to be an extra $2 per shirt. So now it's going from $15 a shirt to what? $19 a shirt to get those extra 2 colors on the shirt, because they'll only do based on how they print up to 3 colors. An extra 2 colors is $2 per shirt. So now it's $19 a shirt to get it sent to you. Then you got to add in all the rest of your particular cost. That's going to start determining what you can charge. So these are things you got to think about. Now, if you're doing print on demand, you ain't got to worry about that, because essentially everything's going to be banked into the print, but it can be limited. So what the Nuclear Dad's talking about, sublimation. I don't know if print on demand can do sublimation. If they can, I don't know the quality of it, right? Most print on demand shirts I see are what I would call the softball club shirt or the church shirt. It's very basic prints, right? So when you get into more complex stuff, can print on demand do that? If you're working with a firm, how much is it going to cost? And Nuclear Dad, when I was looking at shirts, pretty much everybody that did sublimation, what they were charging was so high, I didn't think I could get my margin out of it. That's why I didn't go in that particular direction, right? But those shirts was real big. I don't see them as much anymore, so I don't know what happened to them. But when that style was fly, I like how that style looked at that time. It worked for the MMA fighters. If you use a printer, ask for samples. So anytime you're dealing with printers, ask them for a sample. They should be able to send you their work. And if they flake on that, don't deal with them, right? You want to see what they're putting out of their shop, right? Because you want to see an example of their work. And that's really important. Don't just go by their website. Just ask them, hey, do you have any samples? Because what happens is if you're going to print 1,000 shirts, you're going to mess up a certain amount of shirts. They can send you the mess ups, and it may not be that the shirt is messed up. The actual graphic may be off center just a little bit, but you can see what kind of work's coming out of that shop. Anytime anybody's doing any kind of manufacturing for you from a clothing standpoint, you need to ask for samples or say, hey, we're going to do a run of 10,000, do a prototype or do a mock and send it to me so you can see what it looks like. So I had hats being printed out of China. Before they did the major run, they printed one hat up, they sent it to me, I approved it, and then I said, okay, cool, and then we did the full run. But what I don't like about print on demand is I don't know what the stuff looks like until I go ahead and order it. I don't know any print on demand that does samples, but I haven't really got into the print on demand space. I was working more through firms. If you're dealing with a printer, always ask for samples, right? And if they can't send you a sample, then you may not want to deal with them. Same thing with shoes. In the shoe game, a lot of the shoes that y'all see that are what they call exclusives, really they're samples, right? But you're being told they're an exclusive. Really, it's a sample. It's a first run. Let's run it out here, see how it works. And then if we like it, we go and they put the order in for 20,000. But we always get samples first. So don't let anybody tell you on your first order, you got to order this many, but you don't know what comes out of their shop. You always want to get some samples. Okay, let's keep going. What market do you want to go after, and why would they be receptive to your offer? Okay, when I printed my shirts out, right, I thought I was going to go after one market. You know, the market that really liked my stuff was the hypebeast market. I thought that my market was going to be more of a Pan-African, Afrocentric market. That's not who liked my stuff. The people that love my clothes was the hypebeasts. They love my stuff. They bought my stuff like hotcakes. They love my designs, right? So the market I thought was going to really be receptive to it and want to pay my price didn't want to pay my price. My shirts being $40+ to the hypebeasts, to them that was cheap because they was paying $70 for shirts. When Odd Future, y'all may not know who they is, when they dropped their clothing line, their shirts were extremely expensive. That's what that audience was used to paying for clothes. And that's the same audience that Kanye really is going after. Those are the people that's buying those crazy looking shoes for that price. It's a hype beast, right? And that's what you got to understand is that you need to know what market you're going after and why would they be receptive to your offer. And what I found is that over time, the people that really were receptive to my offer was a totally different market than what I originally thought. And I made a lot of money with that market, and the market that I thought would like my stuff, they didn't want to pay the price, right? They didn't want to pay it. So I went and dealt with the people that wanted to pay it, because what happened was I had an account on Hypebeast and I was promoting my clothes directly on that particular account along with the Facebook ads I was running for my particular website. But I made a lot of money off Hypebeast. That was a great platform for me to get promotion. Next thing, do you need a Chinese manufacturer? Kanye West is going to need an overseas manufacturer. This was the issue that hit Ball when Ball tried to put his shoes out. I talked about that on the video like 2 years ago. Ball could not pay for manufacturing. He also couldn't pay for a mold. Kanye West won't have that issue, but he's going to need a manufacturer, and most likely he's going to need an Asian manufacturer. Now, Adidas has manufacturers all over the country, right? And they also have manufacturers in other parts of the world. But he's most likely, because of the cost, going to need an overseas manufacturer. So this was the work he didn't have to do. I sat on the phone because of the time difference, not on the phone. I sat on the internet and talked to manufacturers in China for hours trying to find the right person. I would be up at 1 o'clock in the morning, Eastern Standard, talking to people in China, trying to find the right manufacturer for what I wanted to do, because I needed to get hats made and I needed a Chinese person to do the hats because the American manufacturers wanted too much money. I also need Chinese manufacturers to do socks for me because the American manufacturers to do socks, what they were charging was going to kill my margins. So only my shirts were getting made inside the United States. I was also putting out hats and I was also putting out socks. I had those made in China. Most likely Kanye is going to need a Chinese manufacturer. He's going to have to figure out how to negotiate those relationships in China. That's going to take time. It's going to take work. Now he can hire somebody to do it, but then now he has to manage that particular person. So this is the foundational work that you have to do when you want to figure out how to start this from the beginning. So we got about 50 likes. If you could go ahead and just hit the like on the video, that'll get it out to more people. So that's the most important thing. Are you going to need an overseas manufacturer? And if you know you need an overseas manufacturer, who are they going to be and how are you going to manage that relationship? Because they're overseas. Most likely there's going to be a time disparity between your local time and their time. When are you going to talk to them? Are you just going to talk to them via email? What is going to be the lag time in between you talking to them? How are you going to manage that? How are you going to manage payment between you and that person? What platforms are you going to use for payment? How do you know you're talking to somebody that can do the job that they say they can do? Because a person on the internet can tell you anything. We know that just from being on the internet. How do you know that? And so these are the things that you got to think about. So this is the foundational work to me that Kanye West didn't want to do. He just wanted to get running with a line. So that's why you attach yourself to Adidas, because they've already done all of this work, right? And then you just come in as a creative consultant and they give you a 15% royalty. To me, that's a great deal. But to him, that was an unacceptable deal. So now what he can do is he can do all this work that the average person is going to have to do to build this from the ground up. But there's a lot of legwork that needs to be done. You just don't get to come in as a celebrity creative consultant and everybody's just wowed by your ideas because you don't have to do no legwork. All right, let's go to the next one. Chinese manufacturer may ask for limit orders. Do you have the demand to handle that? What I mean by limit orders is that when I was getting my hats done, I had to order a certain amount of hats or they wouldn't do the order, right? When I was getting my socks done, I had to order a certain amount of socks or they wouldn't do the order. It wasn't worth them for them to manufacture under a certain amount. Do you have the demand to handle that? Now, Kanye West shouldn't have that issue with demand, but these are the things you got to think about. When you're dealing with manufacturers, they only want to do a run if it's at a certain number, okay? Do you currently have the demand to handle that? Because you can get stuck with merchandise that you can't move. And as a result, you have to either cut the price to sell it or you just got to eat it. One thing you learn about fashion is this. They don't sell the majority of clothes they release. That's one of the hard things about fashion. The majority of clothes that you're going to release are not going to sell. And you got to have it in your business to where you can absorb those losses and keep moving forward. Because every idea that you're going to have for an item, it's not going to work, right? It just won't work. And there's no way to offset that, right? And that's what most people don't understand. When you go to Ross and you go to Marshall's, you know what you're getting? You're getting items that didn't work. You're not getting the items that did work because the items that did work sold. So when you go to Ross and you go to Marshall's, you're getting the items that didn't work. If you live in a city where you got those really, really big, it used to be Macy's, but you got like the big department stores that have fashion in the stores. There used to be a place where you could go to the basement and they would have all their markdowns. What they're trying to do is sell that stuff before they have to sell it to a wholesaler like a Ross or Marshall's, and they got to take a loss on the clothes. Also, certain type of retailers send clothes back to that particular fashion house because they couldn't sell it. So one of the things you got to learn about fashion is one, it's seasonal, right? And you're not going to sell the majority of stuff that you put out. And you have to have the ability to offset that. Okay. And so if you're manufacturing clothes up front and then it doesn't sell, what do you do with that? So do you have the demand to handle a limit order? If you don't, it can impact your business. And that's something people don't think about. That's why POD is so popular, because I'm not on the hook for anything. I could just go POD, they print it, they take the majority of the money because they take all the risk. right? Because they built out all the infrastructure first, but I don't take any of the risk, but I get the least amount of money, right? If you got your margins locked in and you're doing big orders, really your money's in the scale, but you're taking on a lot of risk because you got to make sure you got demand to handle all this merchandise that you have just sitting up. So these are things that people got to weigh out. So this is what Kanye West did not have to worry about. Why? Because Adidas did all this work. This was their headache. It wasn't his headache. He just gets to come in as a creative consultant. They have to handle, we got to order 20,000 shoes from China, and then we got to make sure we get them out, yada, yada, yada. And then we got to make sure that they sell us. We got to mark them down. He don't have to worry about any of that. So this is the kind of things you got to worry about when you decide that you're going to be the person that's driving the car. Okay? Find an artist to create your vector file or your PSD. So the way I did my art is I sketched it by hand. Then I had a guy in the Philippines who did my art on a vector or a PSD. Then I sent that to the printer, right? And so that's what you got to understand is that the art that I wanted to do, I drew it initially, just did a basic sketch. I sent that particular file to a guy in the Philippines who was a really, really good artist. I found him on a website called DeviantArt. He printed my stuff up for me. He would send it back to me in a PSD file or even a vector, and then I would send it off to a printer. Okay? So for the type of stuff I was doing, I was working with an artist. I wasn't the main artist. I was just the creative that was coming up with the concept, and then I had people in position that did that kind of work for me because I didn't know how to use Photoshop well enough to do graphics on Photoshop and know that I want to learn, right? So that's something else that you got to understand. If you're going to do graphics and art, this is why everybody just does block letters. Why? Because it's easy to do on Photoshop. The kind of stuff I was putting out, you got to have a real artist. Not only do they got to know how to draw, they got to know how to also transfer that to Photoshop. So they got to really be an expert on Photoshop. So that's why I said everybody just does block letters. They're easy to do, you know, or do paragraphs on stuff. It's easy to do that. So then it's easy to put that kind of content out, right? Same thing with the sports shirts that was real big a few years ago. Then you need to find a fulfillment center to ship out your prints. They go to percentage of sales. So when I was in Tampa, I was getting sweaters made out of fulfillment center in Orlando, right? And so they had the ability to print out my sweaters. I had some sweatshirts. They could print out my sweatshirts, and then they did my fulfillment of the sweatshirt. But they took a percentage of sales. You know what they took? They wanted 15% of sales. So now what do I have to do? First, I got to have enough volume for that to make sense. Then the price point has to be at a price point for that to make sense, right? But as a streetwear line, my inspiration, not from the graphic side, but from the business side, was Supreme. Y'all may not know who Supreme is. Well, Supreme showed me that you can do a high price point on streetwear if you got big enough of a brand following. So when I put my sweatshirts out, the goal was to always price it at $100. Therefore, with them taking the printing cost and the fulfillment cost, which is 15% of the sale, it didn't bother me. Why? Because the sweatshirt was $100. And so these are the things you got to think about. If you don't want to do your fulfillment, you can send it out to a fulfillment center. They can also print it. They can definitely ship it, but they're going to want a percentage of your sale because they're doing that work to fill it out. And then they're not responsible for making sure it gets to the right person, right? Like I said, when you're Kanye West working with Adidas, you don't have to worry about none of that. They do all that work for you. So you don't have the headache of people emailing you say, hey, I ordered my shirt 2 weeks ago. How come I didn't get it? Right? That's not your issue. You're able to just run around and do what you want to do because I just come in with the creative design and I walk out the office and I tell everybody how brilliant I am because I got all these ideas because I don't have to worry about building infrastructure and then I don't have to worry about supporting infrastructure. This is where the real work is at, right? And that's what I want you to understand. So many people don't want to be responsible for the real work. They just want to be the celebrity, but then they're saying, well, now all he has to do is do 1, 2, 3. But I'm here to tell you, the reason why he did it the way he did it is because he didn't want to do that real work. Because this is where the headache is at, because you got to build out the logistics side of it. Or you got to develop a relationship with these people and you got to give them a piece of your money, right? So you're not going to get 50%. So the way that they're operating now, if Kanye West does all of this, he just, outsources all of his fulfillment, his manufacturing, yada, 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 man, he'd be lucky to get 10% out of the deal. but he got his name on it. But he'd be lucky to get 10% once he gets done cutting everybody else into it because he don't want to build this out himself. Okay, let's keep going. Do you need to create an estimated profit and loss sheet based on cost of goods sold and sales for the next 12 months? Why are you doing this? Because you need to understand, what do I think my estimated return is going to be based on the cost of goods sold and the sales? So when I had my cost of goods sold, it was what it was going to cost to print, what it was going to cost to mail, what the mailers cost. I had stickers that I was putting inside each pack. I had a bag that I was putting the actual shirt inside. All of that was cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold is not just what it costs to print the shirt. It's everything it's going to take to get that shirt out of the door. So it may cost $12 to print the shirt, but it may cost another $3 for everything else involved with the shirt, right? So your cost of goods sold could be $15. Then also, if you're going to run paid ads for each shirt, that's really, to me, cost of goods sold too, because you're running ads to sell the shirt. So you can break down your ad cost per shirt sold, right? So you got to realize, based on what you're selling, what is your cost of goods sold, and determine, well, from an ROI standpoint, is this business even worth me being in? Because many times you're going to find is that you're going to be overworked and underpaid. And that's what happens. People will run into these type of businesses that have not done any numbers, have not done any projections based on what it's going to really cost to get this business going. What's going to be the cost out of the door? And when they realize that, you know what? I'm going to get maybe a 15% margin of profit, and I'll be working like a dog. See, there's difference between the person on Instagram taking that picture of all those packages on their floor saying we got to get ready to ship all that out. But let me explain something to you. That work you're doing, you should account for that work. You don't do free labor. So if you're working in your business, shipping stuff out, it's taking you 5 hours a day to do it. What are you charging yourself per hour? That's going into your cost of goods sold. This is stuff. So what people often find in the merchandise game is that I'm overworked and underpaid. And they figure that out later on. So I made $60,000 this year in my store, but I really got maybe $15,000 profit, but I'm working 24 hours a day just to make that $60,000. I don't want to do this anymore. Because the money in this merchandise game, unless you're going to charge extremely high price points, where you're selling sweaters for $500, you're selling t-shirts for $300, the money's in scale. The money's in scale. If you can't do high prices, right, you got to do scale. So the reason why I put out my line was based on limited pieces and exclusivity, right? I didn't want everybody to have my clothes. My format was Supreme. A lot of y'all don't know who Supreme is. My format for streetwear is Supreme. When Supreme first came out, they had a store in New York City, they had a store in LA, and they put a store in Japan. If you didn't live in those three markets, you couldn't get their clothes. And you know what? They didn't care. It's when the internet got big, especially eBay, and you had resellers, is when Supreme clothes started going all over the country, right? But Supreme at one time was in New York City, LA, Japan. I think it was in Tokyo. If you weren't in those three markets, you can get their clothes, and they didn't care. So Supreme would sell you a sweatshirt for $250. If you don't want to pay the $250, we don't care, because we got an audience of people that are diehard fans of our content. And if you bought a Supreme sweatshirt, you know what you knew? Most people weren't going to have my sweatshirt. And so I had that same kind of marketing. I put out a run. We're going to put out 50 shirts. Each shirt going to be $45 to $50. If you don't get the shirts on this run, you're never going to get the shirt again, because we're not going to put this run back out. We're going to put out a run of hats. We're going to put out maybe 200 hats. Each hat going to be $50. If you don't get the hat on this run, don't worry about it. We're not re-releasing this. So the people that want to come and ask, well, when you going to put so-and-so back out again? Never. Well, when you going to re-release that? Never. You missed it the first time, you just missed it. Well, can I get so-and-so that y'all put out here? No, you can't get it. So I was very arrogant about my creativity, because what I know, you're not going to play with me and my work. And so you got to understand, what kind of line do you want? I don't like Volcom. Why? Because you can get Volcom at the mall. Some white kid in Minnesota can go to the shopping mall and buy Volcom. I didn't want that kind of line. I didn't want a mall line. I wanted an exclusive streetwear line very similar to Supreme because that was my inspiration when I was coming up, right? You had to go to NY to get Supreme. I couldn't get Supreme in Orlando, Florida, right? So I remember when, if you didn't get Jordans when they came out, you couldn't get Jordans. Then Nike changed and made it the way anybody could get Jordans. But I came up, if you didn't get Jordans when they dropped, you couldn't get Jordans. Jordans was a limited release. Then Nike made it the way everybody could get Jordans. You know, they put out different, 100 million different types of the same Jordan. But when I was a kid, when they dropped them shoes, if you didn't get them when they came out, you could not get your shoes. It was very limited. That to me is how streetwear is supposed to operate. But I come from a different environment of streetwear before social media and the internet. So I have a different perspective on it. So you got to decide what kind of line you want to run when it comes to your fashion, right? Because if you look at a lot of the high tier fashion brands, they don't want everybody wearing their stuff. That's why they price it a certain way. And it's also exclusive, right? You can't even get to where you need to go to buy it because you may have to go to Paris to buy it, right? So they know that most people can't go to Paris to buy this and they're not going to be able to pay the price point. So what? We don't have to worry about everybody wearing our clothes. That's my perspective too, but everybody's different. I don't want everybody with my stuff. So then based on your profit and loss, you need to know your margins and how your business needs to operate. And then all you got to do now is just go run your business. So you use your profit and loss format to run your business because you know your margins. And you know, based on cost of goods sold and sales, excluding the marketing, how much do I have to market my business? Because you may need to do a paid ad campaign. If my margin is so tight, right? Once I figure out my cost of goods sold and what I'm going to sell it for, if my margin is so tight, I can't do paid ads. So then how do I get my product in front of more people? Because Facebook was a great platform for me to sell clothes, right? So then what do I need to do? Either I need to bring my costs down or I need to drive up the cost I'm charging for my particular item. Can I do that based on my market? Because I was selling to the hype beast market, they was cool with paying a lot for clothes. The Afrocentric Pan-Africans market, they didn't want to pay a lot for clothes, right? They wanted to, when you going to put this out again? Never. The hype beast market understood when my company dropped XYZ, you got to go get it. If you going to go get it, you're going to miss out. And that was the environment that I came up in because I was coming up when they was dropping the, we call them Beppe, Bapesters, 10 Deep. We know Supreme was doing their thing. Our Future was doing their thing. Like it was a lot of really, really big streetwear lines was dropping. Hood by Air, legendary streetwear line. ASAP Rocky, they was associated with a lot of street back. Like that's really was a thing. We're talking about like 2010, 2011, 2012, when I really was into this type of stuff. The audience knew you got to get this stuff when it come out, or you're not going to be able to get it. This mentality that I can sit around and wait, that's how Nike operates. Streetwear don't work like that. So you got to realize, based on your margins, how do you operate your business? Based on your market, how do you operate your business? And see, these are the things that Kanye West didn't have to worry about. He had to worry about none of this stuff. He just like, I'm just a celebrity creative. I'm this brilliant guy. I got all these ideas, yada, yada, yada. I come in and I sit in front of these Anglo-Saxons and I impress them with my creativity and my brilliance, and they do all the heavy lifting. So based on that relationship, you got to take what comes with that. Or else you got to go build out this infrastructure first, and then now you can dictate how the situation goes, right? But you got to do one or the other. You're not going to be able to sit in the middle. So that's going to be pretty much the end of it, right? What Kanye could have done based on the perspective of a real creative. We talked about before. We live in a different era because of technology. It's a lot easier to build a lot of this stuff out. 20 years ago, there's no way I could talk to somebody in China. I was able to do that because of the internet, right? But you still got to be willing to build out infrastructure. And if you're not willing to build out infrastructure and you're not willing to build out the foundation of your business, it can be very difficult to build out something that you can scale up. It's cool piggybacking off other people and leveraging what other people have built. The downside of that is that they control it. Now, you're going to always have to have some relationships with somebody. But what Adidas has done and Balenciaga have done, and they spent the last 50 to 60 years building out infrastructure and foundation, right? Therefore, they don't need Kanye West. Kanye West needs them. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. And I don't know that if Kanye West wants to go through and build all this out on his own, because it could take 10 years to get this working a certain way. And I don't know if he has a desire to do that. I just think he wants to be the celebrity creative and do the easy part. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what he should have done was done what Virgil did and go into a fashion house and work his way up that ladder. And I don't think he wanted to do that. So that's why he got into the situation that he got himself into, right? So I hope you got some value from it. We're going to read these comments, man. We're going to get up on out of here. So Laney says celebrities are influencers at best. Adidas realized Beyonce's line sells out fast as Kanye might as being difficult to work with. Yeah, but see, celebrities are really beneficial because they can drive a lot of sales. You know, it's something that I learned in college in leadership called referent power. Celebrities do have referent power. Kanye has a big audience, right? But he's not essential to Adidas. You know what I'm saying? Just not. And what we've seen is that Adidas went away from using an athlete to using a music celebrity, where historically they use athletes to promote their stuff, right? Beckham was a big guy for them on the soccer line with that Predator shoe. He sold a lot of shoes for them. But Beckham realized my job is to play soccer and sell shoes. My job is not to do all this other stuff. He does that now that he no longer plays soccer, right? So celebrities to me are very important because if I had a celebrity attached to my business, I would have a bigger business. That's a fact. But they're not essential to the foundation of the business, right? They're just not. And they should not assume that. You know, Kobe was never essential to Nike. Neither was Jordan. Nike was going to be Nike without them, right? Steph Curry is not essential to Under Armour. He's just not. They're going to be Under Armour without him because if he could help them, he should, because their stock price is trash. But he don't have any control over that. He just takes his money and keeps it going, right? Nuclear Dad says, I think that's him and Virgil. Yeah, Nuclear Dad, to be real with you, bro, and, you know, rest in peace to Virgil, because we never knew he was that ill. I think Kanye West is jealous of Virgil because Virgil really is more talented than him. That's just my personal opinion. I think Kanye West was jealous of Virgil because Virgil was more talented than him, and people saw that, and Virgil was willing to do the work because Virgil got into fashion the old school way. You come in at the bottom, you work your way to the top. You make people believe in your creativity, and you make them believe in your work ethic through what you produce in the space, but you got to go work for somebody else first. You don't just get put on like that. That's not how fashion has ever worked, unless you got your own money, right? So that's what I think. To me, really, Kanye West was jealous of Virgil. And so I think he wanted to be Virgil, and I think he felt like Virgil was his competition, but I don't think Virgil was tripping on Kanye West like that. Because, you know, that line that Virgil had on the streetwear space, I didn't like it. It wasn't my thing, but that line did numbers that Virgil put out, the streetwear line. I think it was Off-White. That line did numbers. It just wasn't my thing, you know, but it did numbers, though. He had a good audience around that. Let's keep going. Am I into skateboard culture? Yeah, so we talked about earlier in the video about skateboard culture. So, yeah, definitely. I'm from Florida. Miss Phoenix, I appreciate the $31. I'm glad you're getting value from the particular information. So quality and exclusivity is major for luxury branding. Yeah, and it's real big in streetwear too, right? Nike messed it up by getting people to think we're going to mass release everything, right? It's not supposed to be that way, but that's how they do it because they're operating on scale, right? And Nike came into streetwear and started doing all these massive releases and re-releases and variants of shoes. It just started getting weird, but that's what they do because Nike operates on scale. They're a major organization, so they got to do numbers to justify what they're doing. Everybody else don't have to do numbers because everybody's not trying to make $500 billion a quarter. Like, that's just not what their goal is. So Hypebeast, SneakerCon, yeah, it's also there's another something in Vegas that I was supposed to go to that I never went to. It's like a convention for streetwear people. But it's real big. Yeah, so Nuclear Dad said profit margins can be slim, but if you're not touching the work, it's good. Yeah, you're right. Margins are extremely slim in POD. But the benefit is you ain't got to touch nothing. You just get to go do what you want to do. But the margins are so slim. But Nuclear Dad, my issue is that the margins can be so slim, you can't run ads, right? So you just have to use your celebrity or the name to drive sales because the margins are so slim, there's not enough in there to run advertising. And I'm a big advertiser. I want to run ads on stuff. That's just me. Yeah, so a lot of the Supreme collaborations, which I'm not a fan of, but it works for Supreme, but they do sell out in minutes. And it's the resellers that got Supreme clothing all over the country, right? Because it used to be if you couldn't stand outside that store and get it, you was never going to get it. But what resellers started doing was camping out, buying as much as they could, and then going on eBay or going on Instagram and selling it. And that's how Supreme got out to everybody. But Supreme used to be very difficult to get. So Cool Breeze says, you stationed in Korea, they got a lot of creative artwork. The quality of shirts are cheap. Yeah, it's been no kind of shirt they're using. Yeah, so GC says, yeah, even those mass releases are getting bottled up and marked up. Yeah, and that's what they're doing. It's just the space now is terrible because of the internet. It used to be without the internet, you couldn't do what they're doing, but the internet just allowed them to do it. You know, because you're right. They just buying everything. They're gonna do that to the Kanyes that are still left. I wish I could get them, and I don't even like them shoes. But if I could get those shoes, I know I could go and mark them up big money because that's the last time they're gonna get put out. But somebody somewhere has those Yeezys. They got them, especially the latest release. They're somewhere. The question is who has them, right? And so that's the issue. So that's just the thing is that what they've done with the space now is kind of weird, but I blame Nike. I don't blame nobody. Nike really did it because all those variants and, you know, the Spike Lee Jordans, it's just weird. This weird stuff they started putting out. I'm like, what is this stuff? But it was making them money, so they kept doing it. Then everybody else just started following suit. So I blame Nike. And I'm a Nike fan, but I still blame them. Navy Vet, man, I appreciate the super chat. Erica D, Rihanna had a luxury clothing line under some houses, Louis Vuitton, but shut it down a few years ago. Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong with partnering with a celebrity that makes money, especially if they got a following. But, you know, you got to know you're not the person. And many times, often, we think the celebrity owns the line. And in reality, they're just the face of the line. And the line's owned by investors, but they use a celebrity as a face and then pay them a royalty. What Kanye was involved in was not abnormal. I don't know what his problem was. Maybe he wanted more money. But my question is, what work are you doing? Right? You're getting 15% to do nothing. Right? How long does it take you to come up with the design? And then all the rest of the work that has to happen to get it manufactured, yada, 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 priced, quality control, engineered, and get it to the end customer, you have no involvement in that. And you want more than 15%, and you getting 15%, and you getting 50% off the top. They're not giving him 50% at the bottom of the balance sheet. He getting 50% at the top of the balance sheet. He had a sweetheart deal. So I don't know what was wrong with the dude, but that's his business. I'm not going to tell that man how to run his business. He has way more money than me, so obviously he knows something I don't know. He's not a billionaire, though. We're not going to tell that lie. Supreme, my favorite clothing line. Yeah, I like a lot of their stuff. I don't really, like I said, I like their brand, not necessarily their clothes. On people to get it confused. I like how they run their brand. I don't wear a lot of Supreme. I like how they ran their brand, right? Not necessarily their clothes, but I like how they ran their brand. And they gave me a format on how to run my brand. Because like I said, I remember when you just couldn't get their clothes because of geographical issues, right? Now it's a lot easier to get them, so they got more Supreme fans. But it used to be you had to be in the know to even know what Supreme was, because there was no Instagram or Twitter or YouTube to see Supreme on. You had to watch a skateboard video to even know what Supreme was. You know, same thing with Zoo York. You know, you couldn't just get Zoo York clothes. You know what I'm saying? So that's the thing, is that that's how the space was supposed to work. Is everything was supposed to be limited and exclusive based on what you was in the know of. Now it's everybody knows about this stuff because everything's on the internet now. You know, the internet is the great equalizer. So we're going to get up on out of here. We ain't going to be long because I got to roll into another video. Appreciate everybody for coming through. Hope you get some value from it. David W. Williams, talk to you later.